This is our final portion of our lecture on Chapter 51. This is Part 5. And we're going to start with something closely related to the type of mating system that populations or species will use. And that is the role or behavior of parental care. So the needs of the young are an important factor that's going to influence how mating systems evolve. So in bird species where chicks need a continuous supply of food, it's important for a male to maximize his reproductive success by staying with his mate and caring for the chicks. So in this case, it benefits the species to have a monogamous mating system. But in a bird species where the chicks are soon able to feed themselves or take care of themselves, the male can maximize his reproductive success by seeking additional mates, and as many as he can. Therefore, there is a tendency for that species to have a polygynous type of mating system. So again, what's going to drive the type of behavior in terms of reproduction, mating, and parental care is going to be determined on what are the behaviors that are going to result in the reproductive success and also the survivability of the offspring. What we have found in more recent times as we learn more and more about genetics and map more DNA, we're able to study the relationship between genetics and the actual DNA sequences and the behavior. And so one example of that is in a mammal called a vole. And what they have found is that the variation in just a single locus on a chromosome in a vole can have a dramatic difference in the behavior of this type of animal. So, and that behavior has to do with the parental behavior in two closely related species of voles. So we're going to study evolution later in the year, but thinking back to what you learned in general biology, we can have species that get geographically isolated in some way, or some way they're reproductively isolated, so that they become different. They will evolve differently. And one of the ways that the evolution can occur is through mutations in the genes that bring about a change of some sort that has a beneficial effect for that species. So in the example again of voles, a male meadow vole, which is one of these species, acts as a solitary member of the population, and it does not form lasting relationships with the mates. So following mating, they'll pay little attention to their pups. But the other species that has evolved differently is the male prairie vole, which has a strong attachment or a pair bonding with a single female after they mate, and then those male prairie voles will care for their young pups and protect them by acting aggressively from any intruders. And what they've learned through looking at the DNA is that the different mutation between the two types of vole has to do with that single mutation, a single locus on the chromosome that influences the production of a neurotransmitter that's released during mating. And that neurotransmitter, when it's present, it acts as a stimulus for partnering and parental behavior of a male vole. So when that mutation has occurred, then there is no transmitter. Therefore, we have the voles that do not form any lasting relationships. Another type of social behavior is cooperation, and that's something that you may have studied and should be pretty familiar with. So we have the things of mutualism, symbiosis, the different types of cooperative behavior that can occur between different animals. But we can also have cooperation within the same species. And in this case, we have, for example, packs of African dogs that hunt cooperatively, or white pelicans that herd a school of fish. Dolphins also can work together, or killer whales work together to herd a school of fish. This working together is usually in a way to obtain the greatest resources for food, and that working together in coordination is called the social behavior of cooperation. Very closely aligned with the idea of cooperation is altruism. So, an altruistic behavior is one that reduces an individual's fitness but increases the fitness of the rest of the population. So, it occurs within a species, and one member of that species may sacrifice its own ability to survive in order to help the other members of its species survive. As that penguin is showing there, I'd lay down my life for two brothers or eight cousins. When we're talking about this, for example, building ground squirrels that live in mountainous regions in the western U.S., they're very vulnerable to predators like coyotes and hawks. So what they'll do is they'll have a sentry who, when they see a predator approach, will give a high-pitched alarm, which alerts all the other individuals in that population. But what it also does is makes the predator zone in or zero in on the squirrel that just made that alarm call. So the possibility of that sentry being eaten is much greater. So that is an altruistic behavior that has helped the rest of the population. A type of altruism that is when a behavior towards unrelated individuals aids the individual um, in return for a favor that in the future is called reciprocal altruism. So, for example, if I do something good for you, you'll do something good for me. That's reciprocal altruism. And it's limited to species with stable social groups where the individuals are together a lot. They meet up repeatedly. And where cheaters, those who don't actually end up reciprocating, get punished. Another type of altruism occurs among colonial mammals. And in this case, or another type of colonial animal would be bees, where a lot of the individuals give up their reproductive rights. They will actually provide food for a key individual of their population. So naked mole rats are colonial animals where they have a queen with breeding males, but the rest of the population are non-breeding workers who remain hairless and blind. So I'm going to actually end this discussion of altruism with a SciShow video by Hank Green that will help you understand altruism, because one of the questions that comes up with altruistic behavior is, how does this actually what's its ultimate causation? How does this benefit the population, and particularly the individual who's being altruistic and putting its life in danger? How is that a naturally selected or adaptive behavior that has evolved over time? So again, this is SciShow, and it's on altruism. So our final concepts are Hamilton's rule and kin selection. So just to summarize this, he proposed this quantitative or mathematical measure for predicting when natural selection would favor an altruistic act. And basically, what he theorized is that the more closely related two individuals are, the greater the value of altruism. And it all comes down to the fact that two closely related individuals are going to have very similar genetics. So, therefore, the ability of the altruistic individual to pass on his or her genes is greatly enhanced if it's closely related to the one that it's saving when it's being altruistic. So that you don't need to know this formula, you just need to be familiar with this idea of kin selection, which means that natural selection is going to favor an altruistic behavior if it enhances the reproductive success of the relatives. That's kin selection. The other concept is inclusive fitness, which is defined as the total effect an individual has on promoting its own genes by reproducing and by helping close relatives reproduce and produce offspring. That's inclusive fitness. The final definition I want you to be familiar with is optimal foraging. So, optimal foraging is a theory that looks at foraging behavior as a compromise between the benefits of nutrition and the cost of getting that food, such as the energy that's required and the risk of predation, being eaten, while you're foraging. So natural selection is going to favor foraging behavior that minimizes the cost of foraging but maximizes the benefits of that foraging. And just so to remind you what foraging means is the hunting and searching for food. So it can involve risk-taking behavior of the organism in order to get that food. For example, how far a bird will go away from its protective tree in order to find food is going to increase its risk the further it goes. But maybe there's more food further out. So there has to be